It's on. The Prime Minister has declared a summer general election. Tonight we're in Galashiels in the Borders. Currently a Conservative seat at Westminster, but will it be after July 4th? And what will decide how people here vote? Let's find out. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is the only show in Scotland where the audience get to ask the big questions, answering them on our panel this evening. Fashion entrepreneur Patrick Grant, he was back on screen last night as the judge on a new series of The Great British Sewing Bee. But away from TV, he has his own company which aims to manufacture high-quality clothes in Britain at affordable prices. His new book, Less, encourages us to buy fewer but better clothes. From the SNP, Collette Stevenson is the MSP for East Kilbride. Collette is also the convener of the Social Justice and Social Security Committee. Previously a councillor for 6 years, she was elected to Holyrood in 2021. From the Scottish Conservatives, Sandesh Gulhane is a Glasgow MSP, the party spokesperson for health and social care. Sandesh is a practising GP, continuing to work 1 day a week. He has said it was the handling of the early stages of the COVID crisis which led him to enter politics. And also with us tonight, a Scottish music legend. Fish began his music career in a Galashiels pub and went on to have 11 top 40 hits with Marillion. He quit the band in 1988, but has continued to make music with his final tour beginning in October. And finally, from Scottish Labour, MSP for South Scotland, Colin Smyth, a former modern studies teacher and local councillor. Colin is now also his party's older persons champion. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And of course, welcome to our studio audience here in Galashiels, Scotland's happiest place, apparently. We'll find out whether that is the case this evening, but it's great to be with you for the first time. And you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you are in Scotland. BBCDN is the hashtag you need right now on social media. There's a lot to talk about tonight, and our podcast will be available for you to download straight after the show. So, it is on. After much speculation, the Prime Minister has announced a general election will take place in 6 weeks' time. First opportunity on Debate Night this evening to hear reaction from the voters of Scotland to this. So, what does this election mean to you? What are the key issues for you this evening? Put your hands up. I want to hear from you on this. And why is this timing important for you as well? Man in the middle with the white top first. On you go.
The state of the NHS. So, what are you guys going to do for us to better it? Currently, every board in NHS Scotland has some level of debt. The services aren't going to run if there's not any money to make them.
Okay.
So, what are you going to do?
NHS, okay, key issue. We'll hear about that in the programme, I'm sure, lady in the red here. Yes?
I don't think anyone is doing enough for rural communities. I think it's either Westminster or the Central Belt in Scotland, and we're forgotten about down here.
Okay, we're in the perfect place to discuss rural Scotland tonight. Lady with the glasses there, what's important to you?
Well, I think they don't know what they're doing. Leave it as it is. Better the one we know than the devil we know.
You think Rishi Sunak's made a mistake today calling this?
Yes, I do, very much so. I think the devil we know.
Okay, and lady behind you with the glasses too. On you go.
Hi, mental health, young, old, any age. Needs to be more done with mental health. There needs to be more money put into it, more research put into it, as since COVID, it has got 50, 70% worse.
Okay, thank you. And lady right in the middle, what matters to you right now with this election? What's so important for you?
I would just like to see a Prime Minister that the people actually voted for.
We know in this election there's a huge number of undecideds at the moment. So put your hand up if you are undecided at the moment and you're not sure where to go. Let me go to the man in the back row in the striped top with the glasses first.
Yeah.
When you go.
I'm undecided. I'm definitely pro-independence, but I do feel we definitely need a change. But I think Westminster is a different vehicle to Holyrood. So how I vote in Westminster could be quite different to
How have you voted before, and what are you thinking at the moment?
Well, I don't think Westminster is a fair electoral system with first past the post. But what I would say is, I've sometimes voted SNP, I've sometimes voted Green. On the Scottish system, I've sometimes used my second vote for a minority party. And I think that's more democratic.
OK,
to have a better
thank
balance.
you. Man in the front row down here, undecided. What are you thinking?
I think previously it feels like all I've heard is how another party's worse than the party that than you want to, like, who they want to vote for. So I think if somebody can actually stand up and say this is what we will do to make things better, it might make a difference.
Right. Thank you. And lady right on the aisle there, yes.
I feel like there's very little to pick between the parties just now, and they've got quite a lot to do to highlight what they are going to do to make a difference.
Thank you. OK, right, you've given us a flavour of what's important to you right now. Let's go to our panel. Sandesh Gulhane from the Scottish Conservatives. John Curtis, expert pollster, said today the Conservatives are either very brave or extremely foolhardy calling this election. Which is it?
Up here in Scotland. And we've got to remember that this is different to the election in Wales, the election in England. So the general election here in Scotland, there are three parties. And up and down this country, where the Scottish Conservatives are second to the SNP, you're seeing a real option, a real choice for change, where we will be beating the SNP.
But the question
we
I'm
have
asking
seen,
is why,
but we have
why,
seen.
but why now, Sandesh?
Well,
Turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
We have
so why
seen,
now?
Well, we have actually seen from Jedburgh to Arbroath that when the Scottish Conservatives are in second place, our vote goes up and the SNP vote goes down. So here in Scotland, we are well placed to win seats and to become a bigger party at Westminster in Scotland.
John Swinney has said it's disrespectful calling an election when the Scottish schools will be on holiday and some Scots will be out of the country on holiday as well. What do you say to that?
I think we need to understand that it is up to the Prime Minister when he chooses to call an election. And there will always be a reason why you shouldn't call it at a certain time or a certain place. But ultimately, the election has been called for the 4th of July. And I think that it's quite clear that the Scottish Conservatives are well placed in Scotland to do well here.
Collette Stevenson from the SNP, 6 weeks to the vote. Is this enough time for the SNP to sort out their collective ongoing traumas that we've been seeing recently?
Absolutely. I mean, we're campaign ready right now, and we've been out tapping on the doors, hearing voices from all our constituents in terms of what they want to see.
What do they tell you?
They basically, the key issues, and I mean, John Swinney alluded to today in his statement as well, is about we're here to actually listen to the people and what they actually want. And the key things are the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, the impact that we've had with Brexit as well, and the disaster of a budget that came from the UK government, which has had an absolute knock-on effect on everybody's lives, whether that be the rise in food costs as well, and clothing costs as well. So that's what we're hearing, and that's what people want to see an improvement in.
OK, when the Prime Minister was making his very damp announcement today outside 10 Downing Street, the sound of D-Ream, things can only get better, was in the background. It doesn't feel like 1997 and Tony Blair sweeping into Downing Street, though. It doesn't have that mood about it, Colin Smyth, does it?
Well, these are really challenging times for the country, and I welcome this election today because it is an opportunity for people in this audience, people right across Scotland, to deliver the change that I believe the country desperately needs and desperately wants. But what Labour has to do over the next 6 weeks is to set out exactly what that change will mean for ordinary families.
Caught you unawares, though, didn't it? Because, I mean, Labour had just been told staff could take holidays over the summer because no election was expected.
Well, we've been calling for this election for some time, so we welcome the opportunity to put our case to the country and deliver that change that people want to see. It's about setting up the policies to cut waiting lists in our NHS, which the gentleman said over there. So, for example, tackling tax avoidance, putting that money into having more appointments for Scots to get that treatment they need. It's about making sure that we can deliver lower bills for households, so setting up a GB energy company, a publicly owned company, to lower bills for the public.
All right, don't give us the whole manifesto,
well,
but
that's what we're looking forward to do. We're ready and we're desperate to
Man
go.
on the back row, on you go.
Hi there. I personally have had enough of the SNP, and it's the same with the Conservative. They've had their time. It's now Labour's time, in my eyes.
OK, it is about change. We keep hearing this word from Labour, but it is change for
now,
you.
and he's totally turned it around, yeah.
Thank you. Man with the beard, here.
Thank you. If Labour do come into power, Are you going to go after all the people that stole the money from COVID and all the other people? I mean, is that something that you could turn and say, we are going to do?
Absolutely, and we've made that commitment that we have to get some of that money back for the taxpayer. People are being ripped off far too many times.
All.
If we can get all that money, absolutely, and that's what we should do. And we've given a commitment to go after those people. Far too many people have got off lightly under this government. The government, the Tory government's pals, if we're being perfectly honest, have got off lightly. We need to bring them to justice and get that money back from taxpayers.
And lady in the back row, yes.
Given that this is a Westminster election, Sandesh, you said this is a chance for change. You're the incumbent party, so what change are you actually going to bring and genuinely deliver? And for the other parties, are we going to see a move to slightly more respectful? I'm really fed up of the playground nonsense. I want to see people working together, irrespective to your party.
Well, I mean, we heard earlier from the gentleman there in the white top about the NHS, and we heard about mental health as well. So let me tell you what our party have proposed here in Scotland, a 26-page policy document called Modern Efficient Local, about how we can improve the Scottish NHS, not with more money, but by using that money properly. Look, here in Galashiels, what you're seeing is if your kid is referred here to CAMHS, the Children's Mental Health Charity, mental health, you've got about 50% of them being rejected from being seen. You've got only 40% being seen within the target time. Mental health is absolutely suffering up here. And what I think we should do, and I'll give you a couple of examples of policies that I think will change the way that we do things.
Hold that thought for a second. I'll make time for you to do that. But you can hear from this audience, people want change. The Conservatives have had 14 years in power in the UK to deliver what the people wanted. And people are saying they haven't done that. They haven't got what they wanted.
We're hearing about the NHS, and that's a devolved matter. And that's something that the SNP have been in power for 17 years. And so, you know, if we were to take, for example, all of you here, the majority of you get your health care in primary care. 90% of all patient contact happens in primary care, yet only 5% of the budget goes to primary care. So we would change that to 12%. Suddenly, all of you would be able to access primary care. All of you would be able to get the help that you need locally and quickly, and that would reduce the burden and pressure in hospitals because we're no longer having you to go to A&E to wait.
I want to spend some more time on the NHS, but let's hear some other points that are important. Man on the front row here.
I was listening to the radio on the way down tonight, and the chairman of the Conservative Party in Scotland, when asked about the manifesto, he started off every answer with, we want to get rid of the SNP in Scotland. We want rid of the SNP in Scotland. I would just like to hear politicians just answering a question. And the first politician that answers a question has got a chance of getting that vote.
And lady in the middle here with the glasses. Yes.
For the past, what, 50-odd years, a vote in Scotland means nothing in voting in Britain. So why should this year be any different? When Scotland vote, it doesn't matter who goes into Westminster because we've not voted for them.
I wholeheartedly agree, and that's always been the case in relation to the constituents as well. So previously, you know, voting for Labour, you know, there was a push. The Labour Party were pushing vote Labour, but ultimately we still got a Tory UK government.
But hang on, you won a huge number of seats at Westminster at the last general election. What difference has that made?
Because ultimately,
you're no closer to independence.
Well, you know, we're still getting that message across there that, you know, independence is first and foremost our priority in our party. But arguably, we only stand in Scotland. It's a bit, you know, like Wales as well. We only stand candidates within Scotland. So we're limited in terms of the powers. But I feel that in the time that we've been down there, we've been able to make a difference. And I think Stephen Flynn and the group that's there just now are making a huge difference in holding the UK government account.
Patrick Grant, as well as being a panellist, you're going to be a voter in 6 weeks' time. What's going to be important for you?
Well, I can't help feeling that we've had a government that has done more harm and done less good to both the country and the general population than any government that I'm 50 years old, 52 years old. I mean, most governments in the past, whatever way you vote, you could probably point to something that they've done that has made something better for somebody. But I genuinely cannot think of a single thing that this government has done that has made anything better for anybody. And I can probably spend the next hour listing things that they've made worse. You know, my mother's here in the audience. Healthcare is a waiting list for healthcare at an all-time low. House prices are unaffordable to most people. We can't afford our energy bills. You know, our public transport is a disaster area. You know, public services are not public services. We've got private companies making large profits while we suffer terrible services. There is nothing that this Conservative government has done that hasn't made everybody's life worse. And I cannot tell you how happy I was to hear that this was happening. The timing of it seems very particular. You know, there was Rishi Sunak said today that, you know, they've got the economy back on track. I mean, what they've done is they've got inflation to a level where it's making things bad less quickly. You know, we're all struggling to pay our bills. This isn't good. You know, better times are ahead, he said. But no, it's not. Better times are not ahead. We're all struggling. You know, inflation, pay is not keeping up with inflation yet. You know, the cost of everything is going up. It is absolutely time that we got better politics. I'm interested to have politicians who are there to serve the public. I feel like the current lot are just somewhat shambolic. I mean, they've just sort of given up. You get the impression that they've had enough, and I don't know why they didn't go before.
You ever thought of becoming a politician?
No.
Fish, what's going to decide your vote in this next general election? 6 weeks away.
First of all, I find it really interesting that they named the date as the 4th of July. And I don't know whether Rishi Sunak was told after the fact, by the way, that was Independence Day in America. Right? But I mean, I'm just dismayed. I mean, I was watching the local elections down in England a few weeks back, and everybody was crowing about, you know, who was going to take over in the UK and stuff. Is it Labour, is it Tory? The turnouts were like 30%, right? 30%. And that's the problem that we're dealing with now, is that this intense apathy that is around, you know? And the only time that I remember when politics was like really, really exciting, when everybody was talking about it, was when we had the referendum. And I was brought up in Dalkeith, and I remember when, you know, it was always going to be Labour and you know, and it was never going to be the Tory stuff. And it was always like the two parties. And I like what was said at the back there. It's like, this is the country we all live in, right? And our politicians should be working for us. They should be screaming and jumping and trying to tear lumps out of parties. It should be Labour against Tory, or SNP against Liberals or Tories or whatever. We should be trying to work for the best of the country that we live in. And I believe, right, that this election could be a time to press a reset button. And it is right. You know, it doesn't matter how many SNP MPs we've got down in Westminster, right? They're never really going to make a difference because everybody's toeing the party lines. And as long as you're voting for an MP up here that's either Labour or Tory or whatever that goes down to Westminster, they will be following the whips down in Westminster and doing what they've been told to do down there. Not what they should be doing up here. And that's where I feel. I'd like to see, there are great people, there are great politicians across the parties, right, up here, right? And I'd like to see them all working together for the country and forgetting parties and working for the country, for the best of the country. And that's why I say, like, I'm a reset button. And I think the only way we can do this is move towards a referendum. And the only way you can get a referendum is to show that 50% that is there all the time, right? You know, no matter what's happened with the SNP, that 50% independence is sitting there, right? And I think we've got to galvanise the people, get them excited about being Scottish again, and being positive about themselves and realising, because we're getting put down all the time about our NHS isn't as good as the English NHS. It is. It's better in some areas, right? And we forget that and we just accept it, right? And it's time we actually stood up for ourselves.
You ever thought of becoming a politician?
No, I've been courted, right? I've been courted, but my worry has always been that I didn't want to follow the party. I've got my own mind and I've got my own opinions, and I didn't want to do things just because the party says it. You know, I mean, that's why I'm moving up to the. My wife and I are moving up to the Outer Hebrides, and the thing that interests me up there is the sense of community up there and the way the mix works up there. And that, I think, is important. That's what we've forgotten, I think, especially in the Central Belt. And I know down here there's still strong communities. And that's what we've got to bring together. You know, and that's what I'm saying. It's the 4th of July. There's a chance to put a reset button. And the only way we're going to get it, the only way we're going to get to actually make a decision as a country is if we have a referendum. Right? And I believe we have the capability of dealing with our own affairs up here.
OK. That's where we are right now. This evening, we're in Galashiels. Next week, with Debate Night, we're going to be in Kirkcaldy, then Oban, and we're going to stay on here right the way through and follow this general election campaign with you, the people of Scotland, and afterwards as well. Just keep an eye on the website for our future locations over the course of the next 6 weeks. So let's go to our first proper question of the night, which comes from Ross Stewart. Ross, good evening.
Good evening. What exactly does each party think it will take to save the NHS?
Right, we've already touched on this. One of the big manifesto issues in this campaign. Sandesh Gulhane, still a GP, 1 day a week. What is one of the reasons you joined politics was the experience of seeing how government communicated during the course of the COVID crisis. What's the one thing that is going to improve the NHS that will be in the Conservative manifesto?
So, if you look at health here in Scotland, it is devolved and it is purely the proviso of the government here. So it's SNP that are in charge. The biggest thing that I would do to make a big difference is to move to a preventative agenda. It's not good enough for us to just accept that people's blood pressures are going off and people's hips start to ache and we don't get them to see physiotherapists, and we can't do the basics for people. And as a GP, that's the thing that frustrates me the most when I see people, and I keep seeing them. So an example would be somebody who comes to me with sort of minor hip pain, and by the time they're actually seen by a physio, by the time they're actually getting seen, it's become really much more serious. And then we're going to go down the route of hospital, and that's not what I want to see. So we need to prevent that from happening.
But that takes a long time. Meanwhile, we've got
do you know what?
That's
what you hear a lot of the time. It really doesn't. It really doesn't take a long time, because if you've got a blood pressure issue and you don't know you have a blood pressure issue, it will take a couple of weeks on a medication to get your blood pressure under control. And that reduces your risk of having a heart attack, having strokes, really suffering and causing yourself a real problem. So that is simply not true. And we need to be better at looking after the people. And we have to remember, the NHS is there for you. It's not there for the doctors and nurses and people who work there. It's there for you. And getting you seen in primary care, getting you to get the problems that you want done and get seen to, and by the people you want to get done by, is absolutely vital, which is why Modern Efficient Local, the Scottish Conservatives policy document, which we produced just a few months ago, sets out exactly how we will achieve the NHS to be better.
All right. Colin Smyth, Wes Streeting, Labour's health spokesman, said at the weekend that all roads lead to Westminster when it comes to the problems that are in the NHS. Is he right?
Well, there's certainly a challenge there to make sure that we have the resources to deliver the change that we need in our National Health Service. One of the commitments that Labour has given is to tackle that tax avoidance and non-dom status and use that money to try to bring down waiting lists. So that'll be investment right across the UK.
No, hang on. Wes Streeting also said if we just put increasing amounts of taxpayers' money into a broken system, we'll continue to get poor health outcomes.
But
it's not about money.
No, but it is partly about money. That's not the only solution. We need to see, we haven't seen any reform of the National Health Service here in Scotland by the current government.
He's talking about weekend working as well,
absolutely, and that comes back to that policy, taking the money, tackling tax avoidance, tackling non-dom status, using that money to get our operating theatres open at weekends in the evenings to reduce those waiting lists. So that would pay for 160,000 more appointments here in Scotland. If we can reduce these waiting lists and we can free up capacity to tackle other issues in the NHS.
Thank you. Lady with the glasses on the end here. Yes.
Where are you going to get the staff to be able to do that? Because you can hardly get staff now. They're leaving the NHS to go to private sector because they're not getting paid enough and they're not getting enough time to do the job that they want to do. So how are you going to manage to do weekends and evenings,
And
if that was the case.
Absolutely, and I think it's something we did previously at an early stage that we paid people to do that extra overtime to get those waiting lists down. But you're absolutely right, it will take time in order to deliver the extra staff we've got.
Do it though, that's the problem.
And we have to support staff and pay staff properly. Let me give you one example about how we're actually wasting money that could be better spent on things like delayed discharge. So at the moment we have dozens of people in the hospital here at the Borders General who can go home, but they can't actually get home because they don't have the care package available
that's
for
about
them.
social care.
That's about
That's what
social
you
care,
do.
but it comes back to I think the really important point that the lady made there about how we pay our staff. If you're going to pay our social care workers just £12 an hour, you shouldn't be surprised if we have a recruitment crisis in social care. If we were to boost the pay of our care workers, we'd be able to recruit more and actually get people out of hospital and give them the care package they need, and that would actually save the NHS money.
All right, lady in the back row there, yes.
Can I just make the point that whatever the plans for the National Health Service in Scotland, even whilst it's devolved, its budget comes from the Barnett formula, which is being reduced all the time. If you continue, if Labour gets in, to not review things like the Barnett formula that actually pays for services here in Scotland, then whatever your plan is, it won't work because you can't recruit staff, you can't pay them, and you can't actually provide additional services. And the social care element of it, which I have some experience, is the key part to moving people on quickly. And so you need to think about whether you want to reform the Barnett formula or let us be independent and have our own money.
Thank you, thank you. Lady in the middle here? Yeah.
Just talked about a reset button. I think we need a reset button on the National Health Service and have a rethink of how it should work and what it's for and what we need to pay people. It needs a reset button. It needs to start again.
Thank you. And lady in the front row here?
You're just saying that you can't get people out of hospitals, that people are sitting in hospitals. Why did you close all the cottage hospitals? That's what they were there for.
Thank you.
We didn't, but the government did. You're
Yeah,
absolutely
well,
right.
Collette Stevenson Borders General Hospital was full in January of this year. They were turning away patients because there was no capacity there at all. They're facing cuts at the moment of £45 million in NHS Borders. The question is, what does each party think it takes to save the NHS? What do you think?
In relation to the General Borders Hospital, I know that the MSP, Christine Graham, has been speaking to the Minister in terms of the debt that they've got, and it's been confirmed that there will be no redundancies despite that. And John Swinney has come in today and said one of his key priorities is public services, and that's his focus in terms of taking forward the NHS.
1 in 7 Scots on a waiting list for treatment or care.
And can I just say the record for our NHS in Scotland is far better, and it's on record in comparison to the likes of England and Wales and the amount of investment we put in. Unfortunately, when it comes to the budget coming through, it was never inflation linked, so we were getting less money from a capital perspective. We're still having to pick up, and you hear it time and time again.
So it is about money as far as you... If Westminster gave you more money, the NHS would be fixed?
Yeah, if we could focus more on the NHS. We have got better A&E core times as well, more doctors as well, higher paid than the rest of England and Wales as well. And the other issue we've got as well, when Labour were in government as well, the PFI deals, the amount of money that we're now spending on PFI in terms of the finance for hospitals and public buildings is so huge. And if you were to look at that and see how we can invest it better into our NHS and other public services, then we'd be in a much better position.
Right. These are our end users here. What's important to you? Lady in the front row here.
I have to disagree with the point you're making there, saying that NHS Scotland is better, because in some areas in England it's a lot better, like mental health services. In England, you have the right to choose when it comes to mental health services, so you can go private and you can get seen within 12 weeks if you go private. In Scotland, you don't even get that option, and in the Borders, you can't even get on the waiting list, especially as an adult. To get onto any waiting list in Scotland, you need to have in the Borders, you have to have a secondary diagnosis. So if you want to get seen for ADHD or autism, you have to have anxiety, depression, something else to even get on the waiting list here.
Thank you. And lady in the blue up there.
I think the fundamental issue is that health has devolved in Scotland, and whether you think it's better here than it is in England, at the end of the day, it's not good enough. And people are frustrated with it. And you're nodding your head, but actually, you should be accountable for what you are doing to the NHS in Scotland, and there seems to be no accountability with politicians, and that is why people get frustrated with it, because this is something we're all paying for, we're all contributing to, and we're not getting the service that we should get, and you need to be accountable for it.
Thank you. Patrick Grant, you're a businessman, you're an entrepreneur. What will it take to save the NHS?
Well, I think fundamentally we have to decide whether we want to have an NHS and we want it to be free to everybody. And I don't know anybody, apart from some people who work in private healthcare, who don't think that a universally free health service for everybody is a good idea. But we've had all sorts of chips away at the system. And I think most people would say that they would like to have a functioning free NHS and social care system that works beautifully for everyone. Like, everybody would love to be able to go and see a GP, they'd love to be able to get the operations that they need. But for a very, very long time, the NHS, and it's the same in our school system, has run on a great deal of goodwill from those people that work within it. Doctors, nurses, healthcare providers, social care providers, teachers have all worked above and beyond because they believed in the principle of public service. They have been paid poorly, but they were happy to do it because they believed that they were respected and valued by the entire country. Now, most of us, I would imagine, have a great deal of respect. But when you start to chip away at that from the top, if you have a terrible boss, you don't want to work hard for that person. So for the last 14, 15 years, I know lots and lots of people in healthcare who have just had enough of going beyond. I mean, it's simple things, and they're not paid enough. Why are people doing the hardest, most emotionally and physically difficult jobs in our society being paid so little? We should all get behind the idea that they should be paid a fair amount. But why also, thank you very much for the start of applause there, but why also the simple things? Why do doctors and nurses and healthcare staff have to pay for coffee? Why do they have to pay for parking in the hospital where they work? Every single thing, it's been a little chipping away, privatising. It might seem trivial that doctors and nurses have to pay for parking, but I know it just makes you feel undervalued.
Patrick, West Streeting has said middle-class lefties will not stop a Labour government from using the private sector to reduce backlogs. Is that you?
Well, we are in a hole. We are in a hole. I mean, I have a friend who's an ENT surgeon who thinks he's got a waiting list of 20,000 operations. My mum has just been told that she's going to have to wait another 2.5 years for an essential operation on her shoulder. We are in a desperate situation. If it was me, I would do everything I possibly could to get us out of it. But fundamentally, we have to rebuild the sense that everyone in this country feels that the NHS is a fundamental part of how we are as a society. We have to value those people, we have to pay them well, and then we will get people who want to do their service. But, you have to show them that it's going to be worth it, that it's not just they're going to get over a hump and then all of a sudden we're going to be privatised. I think the fundamental principle is, I would love to ask people who feels that we should have a privatised NHS, who would rather have a free public health service. And I suspect most people would rather it was free.
OK. Let me hear from the gentleman with the blazer and the white shirt. Yeah, on you go.
Hi, I'm really glad that we brought up the subject of the NHS, because the NHS and the borders at the moment has a huge up-and-coming problem, and that's the closure of the hospitals at Kelso, Duns, Hoyk and Peebles. This is really relevant to this area. In 2007, John Lamont fought to keep them open. He's still fighting to keep them open. Now, you can throw the Barnett formula at us, but we had a point where the former First Minister froze council tax. And in doing that, he endangered the budgets and the budgets to the NHS. The scathing cuts that's going to be in the borders through this are incredible. And I think you should hang your head in shame about comments about people spending money when the amount of money that SNP wasted on the ferries.
OK. Man in the back row. Yep, on you go.
I'm sorry to be blunt. Surely the only question here within the context of a general election is how much money comes from London up here that can be therefore distributed by a devolved government. All of the detail is devolved government. The only question here is how much money comes from London, and it's patently not enough, but then probably each other region in the UK can say the same.
Fish, can there be enough money to do what is required in the NHS at the moment, given where we are with it and given all the pressures of an ageing population?
No, I don't think so. I think what you just said right at the end there, with ageing population, the NHS never, I think when it was started, I think nobody envisaged the fact that everybody's going to be living a lot longer. You know, it's a bit like, you know, it's on a battlefield. You know, you don't, you know, in wars now, you don't have death counts because everybody's getting wounded and taken care of. And that's the problem nowadays. And I don't think there ever will be enough money to put to the NHS. I think there has to be a rethink in how it does. I mean, my wife's German, and we were thinking about living in Germany in 2015, and you know, and I'm 66 now, and I had to look really carefully about, you know, if I moved to Germany, what were my circumstances going to be and how was it going to operate? And I was going to have to pay for private, I had to take out an insurance. And the thing they have in Germany is you do have, there is a safety net, you know, but for a lot of things you must pay money. And I think we've got so used to it being free that we're forgetting the costs, the increasing costs that are happening because people are getting older, right? And I think we have to face the fact that we are going to have to pay more taxes. And I think there is going to have to be an element of, I hate to say it, because I mean, I think there's a subterfuge going on here where the Conservatives, and as far as, you know, they're bringing in this American system in the back, you know, these little bits of privatisation that are happening, you know, that's happening all over the place. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is to bring this thing so that the NHS is eventually crippled, that we've got nothing else to do but accept an American system. And Big Pharma is going to jump at it. American Big Pharma is going to jump at the UK, right? And we've got to be very wary of that. And I think we've got to think ahead, and I think we've got to think a little bit out the box with this, you know? And I don't think we can just go, this is the NHS, this is how it always will be. I think we've got to look at it and swallow a bitter pill and start looking at bringing in elements or a private or some sort of tax relief for people that are using privates. Because somebody who's getting a knee operation private is meaning there's a space coming up on the NHS. And I think that's a bit out the box thinking it needs to be employed.
80% increase in the number of Scots patients using private care over the course of the last 12 months.
And it was also said, I mean, that there was the conspiracy theory where allegedly, you know, it was mentioned that, you know, when COVID hit, you know, the private health companies were very aware that what was going to happen, that there was going to be a huge backlog, like when COVID was relaxed.
No conspiracy theories in debate.
Yeah. But you know what I mean.
Your views on all of this, hashtag is BBCDN. I know we'll talk about the NHS over the course of the next 6 weeks, wherever we happen to be in Scotland. But we've got other things to talk about tonight, namely next the economy. Question 2 comes from Liz Jardine this evening. No relation, Liz, but good evening.
No, not unless you're rich.
No. See you after the show.
How can we use the textile industry to create more jobs and boost the economy in areas that need it most?
Thank you. Better economic news, which we've touched on today, with inflation down to 2.3%, if that is good news. Patrick Grant, how can we use the textile industry? You've got family experience of it.
I do.
To boost the Scottish economy.
Yeah, my granddad worked here in Galashiels. He worked for a company called Ladle and Fairgreaves. He then left that job, and his next job was to try and bring inward investment into the Borders. He worked for the Borders Development Council. We had matchboxes around our house with the slogan, fresh air and elbow room for industry. It was his job to try and help rebuild here when we allowed the manufacture of textiles and clothing and lots of other things that we use all the time to be moved somewhere else. And we were told that all of that was for our benefit. We'd get cheaper stuff. We didn't get cheaper stuff, we just got worse stuff. But in the process, we've sort of sleepwalked into this position where, you know, in the textile industry 50 years ago when I was born, there were about 1.6 million jobs. Many of them were here in this region. Today, there are fewer than 100,000 right across the country. We've lost 1.5 million jobs just in textiles and clothing. We've lost about 5.5 million jobs in manufacturing. And it's almost like I planted that question because this is what I do. I run a business that is all about trying to help rebuild the textile industry in the UK through work. we have an opportunity to create work in this country that is meaningful and well paid for people, but we have to decide what we want. We've lived since Thatcher and Reagan. We've lived with a system that is known as neoliberalism, which is an economic system that says businesses can do whatever they want because profit is the best thing that we can allow them to go for, because ultimately we will all benefit. Now, 50 years of that policy has shown us that that isn't the case. 1% of people have benefited, 90% of people are no better off at all.
But that's a hard message in a cost of living crisis
it's
where fast
very
fashion
hard.
is cheap.
It is a very hard message. There are certainly lots of people who are struggling just to put clothes on their children's or their own backs. Now, I would never suggest that those people are going to have to be forced to pay more. But we could all choose to have, if we can all decide where our money goes. All of you have the choice about where you spend your cash. Now, if you want to spend your cash putting it into the pockets of billionaires and, other countries, that's fine by me. But you could, if you wanted to, choose to have maybe a few fewer things and to choose things that are made where you live. It makes us all feel good to buy good things that are made by people that we care about. And that is something we can all choose to do. Not all of us, because some people do not have the financial choice, but many of us, including the lefty middle class like me, could choose to put our money somewhere different, but we are conditioned to buy stuff by this brilliantly sophisticated machine that gets us buying more and more and more and more stuff, cheaper stuff. They're selling us stuff all the time. We could choose to step back from that. We could choose to consume differently, and we could choose to buy things that are made in places like Galashiels and the Borders. I sell them, I try and sell them affordably. But it's up to us. It is up to us what we do with this stuff.
This is sounding like a manifesto, isn't it? Man in the front row down here.
So would there be an argument to try and start to culturally protect textiles and garments? And obviously we've got Harris tweed, which is protected by law, and then there's obviously Donegal tweed and stuff like that, but Scottish tweed, Scottish tartans, things like that. So it's keeping our cultural heritage here and keeping the money here rather than getting the cheap imports.
Borders knitwear.
Well, I think we make. I make knitwear. Sadly, I'm not wearing any today. I make knitwear in 2 factories in Hawick, which I'm sure you're all delighted by. But I can tell you exactly where every single thing that I'm wearing is from, and I think it's a personal. We've got to take personal responsibility for this. I don't think we can mandate for it. I mean, it would have been amazing if we'd had the foresight to trademark the word tweed when that first kind of bolt of tweed was mistakenly called tweed all those years ago. That would be a brand name worth having and protecting. But it is. I think that's not the answer. I think we have to decide what we want our society to be. I mean, there are about 9 million people who don't have work in the UK. Economic inactivity is a very different number from unemployment. AI and automation are expected to get rid of another 8 million jobs in the next 11 years. What are we all going to do for work? I mean, part of the problems we have with healthcare and other care is because we don't have good work to go to. We don't have work that makes us feel good.
Let's see how we do that here. Colette, how do we bring jobs and boost the economy in this area, in the Scottish Borders?
Well, particularly I know that it's always been shrouded in the textile industry, and it's sad to hear, that it has diminished, but I know that from an SNP government, one of our key priorities is trying to boost economy and inward investment as well, and it's models like that you're using, Pat, that are absolutely, fundamental to trying to promote more inward investment.
So what's your message to people watching this programme?
So basically, in terms of this area and the wider area within Scotland as well.
Buy Scottish?
Absolutely buy Scottish. I mean, already in terms of our whisky and our food, products, we are doing absolutely amazing in comparison to the rest of England and Wales. And to put textiles on the map in Scotland would also be absolutely fantastic.
Let me hear from the man who I'm sure is wearing a Borders cap, tweed cap at the back there. Yeah, on you
Nearly. My biggest concern is that there is a growing community that is constantly tightening their belt to the point where it's actually touching the backbone now. So the choice isn't actually there for a lot of people in a very real sense. And I think that is an issue that needs to be looked at.
Colin Smyth.
I think the gentleman's absolutely right. What we have to do is to make work pay in this country, and some of the proposals that Labour have set out in a new deal for working people will achieve that. We're going to ban those exploitative zero-hour contracts. We're going to raise the minimum wage to the same level as the real living wage to put more money in people's pockets. We're going to get rid of fire and rehire. These things will make a difference to actually making work pay, put more money in people's pockets so they can afford to maybe spend a little bit more in some of these services. But there's two other things I would do to try to boost the economy in this area and to support those businesses. Very appropriately, we're here in Borders College at the moment, and a big issue when I speak to businesses is the difficulty they have recruiting skilled workforce. Yet it breaks my heart to see the fact that here in the Borders they're cutting the number of apprenticeships because of a reduction in their budget. That's the economics of the madhouse. We've got to train our young people to make sure our businesses can employ more people from the local area.
But how do you boost demand? Because what will change that is boosting demand and creating a greater demand for the products. How do you persuade people, what Patrick was saying, to shop differently?
Well, I think you have to give people the money in the pocket to be able to afford to buy some of these products. That's the thing. The solution to the fact that people are struggling at the moment isn't to try to keep cutting prices and import cheap things from abroad that aren't high quality. The key is to make sure we boost the incomes of people so they can afford to spend a bit more in buying local stuff. But one thing that we could do as well is actually lead by example in the public sector. The procurement budget for public bodies in Scotland is about £14 billion a year. Imagine if a lot more of that was being spent locally and buying local produce, whether it's food for the National Health Service, whether it's the types of textiles, the clothing that our nurses and doctors wear. Imagine if we spent a bit more locally rather than always on cheaper imports. That would make a big difference and lead by example.
Fish, how do we boost the economy here, and what part can textiles play in that?
I mean, I can remember coming to Gala when the mills were open, and you know, I'm driving through today and seeing the same empty buildings, which is sad. You know? I mean, one of the things, I mean, we're talking about, you know, our country, and you know, we had a great reputation for wool and Scottish wool. I can't really go on this because I mean, I've got L plates on my back as far as being a crofter goes, right? And I'm picking up bits and pieces of things. But one thing I've been hearing about and learning about is like, you know, Scottish wool. You know, there are sheep running about and the wool's just falling off them because it's too expensive for farmers to basically shear the sheep because they can't get the prices in Scottish wool, right? Now, the Scottish Government needs to come in and help them because the crofters need that, the Scottish farmers need that, the hill farmers in the Borders, right? Where a lot of the wool used to come to, they went into these mills in Hoyk and Gala and round about, you know. That's what needs to be done. And we need to take pride. I mean, it's great having Harris Tweed. Harris Tweed is a very expensive item. I mean, the last time I was up there, it was like, I'd love to have that, but it doesn't quite fit. All right. But I mean, we need to get into the Scottish wool industry and start backing it up and creating, and maybe getting it and supporting not just big industry things, but also the small industries, the small farmers, the people that are creating on the ground that can feed like they used to do with Harris Tweed way back. Yeah. You know, when it was originally shuttled and turned and everything and brought the mills. That's what we need to do. But that needs to go right back in the farming community, sort that out.
You know, we're sitting here, this is a polyester backing here, this could be a woolen textile. I'm sitting on a polyester chair or a polypropylene chair. We know, the wool crisis it breaks my heart. You know, it costs, you get 25p a fleece and it costs about £2 to shear a sheep. You know, that is not making farmers' lives good at all. But the government could spend its money locally. You know, we're in a textile area. Why are we buying gowns from China? Why are we buying military uniforms from China? You know, the money that you spend locally, there's been lots and lots of research into it. Manchester and others, Preston, have very deliberately started policies. And when you spend money locally, it gets respent locally. It's not just the mills, it's all the people that supply the mills. Every penny goes round and round, 3.5 times. So
well,
that
Sandesh,
140 billion is...
That's why it needs to happen. That's why investment needs to happen to then spin off. How are you going to do it? How do you bring jobs here and investment here?
Well, I think we do need to protect our farmers, and we need to not cut the agri-bill, but we need to make sure that we are spending more money protecting our farmers and our crofters and allowing them to do the job that is absolutely vital. You know, it's not just textiles, it's food as well, and it's security for our country having this happen. So I think that's the very first thing we need to do. But we've also heard how important it is for each of us to make decisions when it comes to how we spend our hard-earned money. And whether that means that you buy a little bit less, some fewer items, but go for things that are local, or whether that means you need to look at, let's go to talk about supermarkets and talk about packaging. You know, do I need to buy something which is in packaging, or should I just buy the individual items? Now, if we each individually start to make those decisions and we each individually start to do these things, then what you'll start to see is retailers will start to go with exactly what we want. You will start to see big clothing companies stocking local items because that ultimately is what we will purchase and that's what they will sell us. And so I do think there is a bit of responsibility on us as well.
It's about driving demand, as we were saying there. Your views on all of that, the hashtag is BBCDN on social media. We've got time for one more question tonight, which comes from Stuart. Stuart Gray. Evening, Stuart.
Hello. I moved back to the Borders at the start of the year. The reinstatement of the Borders Railway was a key factor that made this a practical option for me. Can I look forward to the rail line being electrified to reduce the journey time?
Thank you, Stuart. I think Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Fiona Hislop, was here last month, actually, meeting campaigners, rail campaigners. There's been a feasibility study going since 2021, I think, Fish, about extending the line down to Carlisle. It's been a big difference, people say, we've spoken to today, having the railway here. What needs to happen to it moving forward?
Yeah, and I can remember when I was a kid at Dalkeith watching steam trains and they took the line out, you know. When we put the line back in, I was overjoyed. But again, if I'm correct, the Scottish Government wanted to put 2 lines down and they were shut back and they were told that they had to reel the whole thing back. So it turned into one single line. The passing places were shortened, so which is why I think they're only running 3 carriages on that, right? The vision was there, right at the start, but it wasn't employed. We should have done a lot bigger. We do have to electrify. I think that's definitely the way forward, and I believe that, yes, it's like we need to look at taking the line further down to Carlisle. But it needs imagination. It needs a lot of imagination, and I don't know how that's going to be funded. I mean, I'm living in Haddington at the moment, and we've got thousands of people moving into the area, and we're desperate. I mean, they need to put a new line between Haddington and Longnidry. You know what I mean? Going back to the Borders line, I think there just needs to be a lot more imagination, a lot more money thrown at it, a rethink just how big it should be. Because I think it should be a lot bigger.
Colin Smyth?
The reopening of the Borders Railway proved that if you build the railway, people will come. It has been a massive success. There's no question about it. Frustrating thing for me is that, so tonight I came by train from the Parliament to Gala, but on Monday I was in Gala and then Hoyek, so I couldn't go by train because the train stops at Tweed Bank. So not only do we need to electrify that route to decarbonise our railways, which is crucially important, what we need to do is to get on with extending that railway to Carlisle, starting off in Hoyek, going all the way to Carlisle. The opportunities that would open up for the Borders, allowing people to go south as well as north, to give opportunities for people to move. And it's so crucial to reducing our emissions and our greenhouse gases. It's environmentally friendly. For me, extending that Borders Railway is a no-brainer, and we have to keep campaigning for that until we see it completed.
Thank you. Gentleman there with his hand up. Yes, on you go.
Can I ask something? The railways are something fantastic for the Borders, okay? But when the people that come here in the Borders, where they come? In an empty town. Are you ever walk a single politician around our town and see how many businesses they're closed?
You're absolutely right, yeah. You're absolutely right.
Everybody speak about, I'm come from a different country, okay? I'm Italian. And it's 23 years I'm in Gala and I support Gala so much, okay? Everybody talk about NHS, mental health. All of you have a walk around the town and see what's happened on the last 3-4 years.
Thank you.
And I'll give you one example of what we can do to change that. We need a level playing field when it comes to tax. Imagine if we cut the business rates for those shops in Gala to reduce those business rates, funded by properly taxing the big companies, like online companies like Amazon, get them to pay their fair share of tax and support our independent businesses in our town
We've only
centres.
got 3 minutes left now, so I want to get round the rest of the panel. And Sandesh, Gulhane, Borders Railway, what needs to happen to it?
I agree. We do need to extend it and we need to electrify it. But it's not just railways. Our buses here aren't great. We need better connectivity. And you know, we talked about town centres. It's not just here in Galashiels. It's in Glasgow. It's in Edinburgh. If you look at town centres across Scotland, they are not what they used to be. And we need to do better. We need to, the SNP government need to pass on the rates relief that came up here with Barnett consequential money. That was not passed on to businesses to keep shops open. And we've heard a number of things from Collette, but the biggest one was the key priority, the only priority for the SNP is independence, not looking after us, not ensuring that we can travel
let's see what she's going to
towns.
say now. We've only got 2 minutes left, Sandesh. 2021, this feasibility study started. When are people here going to find out what's happening with the railway?
In relation to the feasibility study, I believe it's still ongoing. What
does that mean? When will there be an answer for people?
When there'll be an answer in terms of further... I mean, if you look at East Kilbride, from where I'm from, the electrification is going on. There's a big enhancement programme carried on there.
But they want it here.
But they couldn't dual the lines because of the cuts that we've got as well from the consequentials in the Barnett formula as well. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I'd like to see that line extended right down to Carlisle, as you've pointed out as well, and the line electrified. And we are pushing forward in terms of climate change. We made a huge difference there from 2011 moving forward to now in terms of meeting our targets as well, because arguably we want to try and reduce car usage. We want to see an uptake in trains and more
trains
and
would help
public.
with that. 1 minute left. Patrick Grant, what needs to happen with this?
We need really, really good trains in this country. We need really good buses. Privatised trains and privatised buses are only going to run the routes that are going to make them the most money. They're not going to go to the places that really need them. That is a fundamental principle. We should be just putting... I think we should be bringing that public transport back under public ownership. We made the point about it being greener. It's also about energy security. If our trains are electrified, we're not reliant on petrochemicals from the other side of the world. We can generate our own electricity to power our own trains. You know, it's just got to be better. And of course, you've got to go to Carlisle. That makes no sense. You've got a line that just pokes 2/3 of the way down and it stops.
Patrick, thank you very much indeed. We're out of time, I'm afraid, this evening. That's it for us for tonight. You can keep on the conversation going via the hashtag on social media. Hashtag is BBCDN. We're going to be in Kirkcaldy next week. We're going to be in Oban the week after that, and we're going to be with you right through this general election campaign. If you missed any of tonight's show, we're repeated a bit later on BBC One Scotland. You can catch it any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much to my panel here tonight and to our audience here in Galashiels. It's been lovely to be with you. We will be back, and you are happy as well. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night.